Joel Dominguez of Saber, welcome to 69 Faces of Rock. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Saber is still fairly a new band. How did you get started on this project?
Oh, it started while I was in a different band and Steven was in a different band, and both of our bands were on the verge of breaking up. So when that finally happened, we got in contact with each other and we've seen each other play around the LA circuit. So we were fans of each other already. And we sat down, we had lunch, we talked about the same similar interests we had in bands and singers, guitar players. So it was a no-brainer. We're just like, all right, we got to start something for sure. And I was already working with Jesus and David. We've been writing music for years by this point. So we brought him along. We showed him the demos of songs we had, and he instantly just fell in love with them. So he picked up the mic and we started rehearsing and jamming. Showed him some of the lyrics I had. He wrote his own, and the
Mhm.
songs just came together by like it was like nothing. It was instant chemistry. It was so amazing.
Now, obviously, you mentioned that you guys have some previous band experience. So, what bands were you involved with before Saber?
Before Saber, I was in a band called Ram It,
Hmm.
and Steven was in a band called Lethal Night. And we used to play a lot around the LA area. We played few festivals, if I'm not mistaken. This was years ago. My memory's a little fuzzy of it, but we played a lot in the LA like clubs and like backyard shows. So we cut our teeth just playing for years through that. So by the time we got with Saber, we already had the experience to like songwriting and stage presence. We just knew exactly what we wanted to do.
Now, considering all of that experience, when you got the idea for Saber, what did you want the music to sound like?
80s heavy metal, baby.
Mhm.
We wanted the sound of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, but with the look of like Cinderella, Whitesnake, Motley Crue. Because a lot of bands nowadays they just wear jeans and a t-shirt, which is fine. And you guys can do as you please, but we love the whole visual aspect of a live band. We feel like it's kind of missing nowadays, so we love bringing that, and we love seeing the enthusiasm from the crowd, and they're so into it.
Mhm. How did you go about carry out that plan?
We had to sit down and talk about it because Steven wanted to wear leather and denim and was like, everybody does that, dude. We got to be a little different.
Mhm.
So I was showing him like some of my favorite 80s bands and like some of their live videos back in the day. And I was like, look, just like visualize this, but like with us. And we can definitely do something a little different. So that way people can recognize us when we walk on stage, when we're performing, and they'll get a kick out of it. And I ended up selling it to him, and he loved it. He ran with it, and he made it his own. It's fun watching him like, and he wears this stuff like every day. It's not just on stage. Like this, if you see him walking to like the grocery store, he looks like he's ready to go on stage. That's just
So,
who he is.
so it must have been a convincing talk. Got him on your side.
Yeah.
Um, so your first album, Without Warning, now that title says it all, right? Um,
Mhm.
how surprised was the metal world when you unleashed that record upon them?
Oh, they were surprised at how good it was. We got so many amazing comments from people. We got a ton of magazines adding us on like best album of the month, and then later on best album of the year. So I personally was shocked. I was, as an artist, I'm just like, I don't know if it's gonna do good or not. I feel iffy about this song, but the entire metal community and our peers, they loved it. They showed so much admiration towards us and how well we did. And Trevor from Haunt, who helped us produce it, even when we finished, he was like, "You guys got a really good, solid album here. People are gonna love it when they hear it." And he was right. Everybody just like was playing it everywhere, and I was just amazed and taken back by it. And I loved everything that people were saying.
Which probably makes sense for the next question. So musically and from the perspective of time, how would you describe that album?
Now it's grown on me for sure. I mean, I don't ever really like go back and listen to my music because when I write it and then record it, I have it playing all the time. So I'm just like I'm done listening to it. But I'll go back and listen to it very rarely. And when I do, I'm just like I kind of see now what people were saying about it, were like certain parts that they loved or they recognized of other bands that they listened to. So I understand that now for sure.
Mhm. You mentioned Trevor from Hunt. What was his? How much involvement was he?
Oh, he was a huge help from when we started up until now because when we were writing our songs, we didn't have a drummer.
Mhm.
So we sent him the demos and we knew that he recorded albums on his own. He played all the instruments and he sang on them. So we sent him the demos and we told him we don't have a drummer and he heard the songs and he's like, "If you guys want me to, I'll play drums on the album." And he would send us demo tracks of what he was doing and he would explain why he did certain drum parts like this and it just made sense. So he did the drum tracks first and then we would arrive and then we recorded all of our parts after that. And then when it came time for the second album, we sent him demos again and he gave us critiques. We fixed a ton of parts and then we went over, but this time we had Jesus play drums on it and we had Antonio play the second guitar and again, we spent a week up there and recorded the whole same thing. He guided us through every single phase of pre-production, getting ready, making sure that you're taking into account every single hour that you're doing because it takes a long time to get a good take and then make sure you're happy about the end result. So he was a big help throughout the entire process.
Oh, such a cool and talented guy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, were you able to do any touring, any live shows? What did that look like?
We did tour back in 2022. It was the Allied Forces tour with Haunt, Screamer, and Traveler, and we
Mhm.
were the opening band. And even though we were the opening band, man, we brought it. We kicked ass every night, and we were like filling up the every like place we played, and it was crazy because we started. It was usually like around 7:30 when we would start, but people would come. They're like, "Oh my God, it's Saber!" It was like it would every single night to me was like I didn't even know people were gonna show up, but place would get packed. So it was a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah. Um, Also, according to the info I have, the album was only available as a digital download, right?
Without warning?
Yeah.
No, we ended up we printed
So I was
vinyl,
kind of wondering
CD,
if
and
there's any
cassettes.
physical copies of.
There is, but it's all sold out.
Okay.
But thankfully, when we signed with RPM Roar, they took on Without Warning, and they're making a reissue of it. So
Mhm.
our European fans can also have a chance to get it.
That's outstanding. Now that you look back at it, what impact do you think that album made for you?
Well, considering that people still talk to me about it, I I like to think that it influenced a lot of musicians that are younger than me for sure. At least that's what I like to think because every time people see me at a show or anything, they always refer back to that album and specifically some of the songs on there. So I like to think that I play a small little role in them wanting to pursue being a musician or even just to let alone pick up their instrument because
Mhm.
that's one of my main goals is just to inspire the next group of kids. Even if I couldn't succeed as a musician, I want the next person to be able to have that opportunity.
That sounds good.
Mhm.
So how did you get going on Lost in Flames, your new album?
Well, that started when we came back from the tour, from that Allied Forces tour. We saw all the fans that we had in the West Coast and the Midwest, especially over in Texas. So when we got back, we're like, we need to start writing. We need to do whatever we can to play more shows and get back on the road. But the thing that happened was we all started going through some very tough times in our lives, which like delayed songwriting. And then when we finally got the songs written, we signed with a label, and the label was gonna release it, but then they ended up merging with a bigger label, which caused more delays. So it took a long time for the album to finally come out.
Mhm.
So we haven't been able to really like go out and play shows further away because we'd be playing the same songs and people haven't heard the new songs yet. So we thought it'd be best to just kind of wait, even though we really were eager to go out and play. We just decided we gotta wait till the album's out and then we'll do a tour so we can support the album.
Mhm. Why the title Lost in Flames?
Um, well, like I said earlier, we're all going through some pretty bad times in our life, but specifically Jesus, his house burned down and he lost everything. So I just knew that the theme for this next record had to be something to do with fire. And since we were all struggling, it's like the sense of despair and being lost. it instantly just clicked in my head. I wrote down Lost in Flames and I showed it to the guys and they all immediately agreed like that's the title right there.
Um, does all this hard time is reflected in your songs?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you definitely read the
What are your
lyrics.
songs about?
So Lost in Flames is about that one specifically is Steven and what he was enduring after he ended a relationship that he had been in for about 13, 14 years. So that's a long, really long time. So he was definitely going through some bad times and he was trying to help himself recover, and that's what that song's about. And so is Shattered Dreams and Shadow of You specifically about that relationship. And then um Steelbreaker, that one's a little more of a our we're huge fans of this anime called Berserk. So we wanted to just kind of
Mhm.
throw a little like of our influences, not just music wise, but like comic wise or anime wise. We just threw that on there. And then Phoenix Rising was basically just about getting back up. And even though you're going through something tough, you have to get back up and pursue what you're doing. Don't let whatever's going on bring you down.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what lessons did you learn from the first album that you were able to apply with Lost in Flames?
Definitely better songwriting. We, so on that first album, it was a mixture of like all of our influences from bands of like the 80s or whatever we would listen to. We all just kind of jumbled it up together and spat it out, which we love those songs. We play them all the time. But going towards the second record, we did a little more introspective look in ourselves and thought, well, what does Saber sound like? Not just like our influences, but what do we sound like? So we kind of like sat down, worked out the riffs, and I mean everything sounds like metal, right? But it wasn't until Steven put his vocals on there, I was like, all right, now this sounds like a Saber song for sure.
Do you think this album really begins what Saber is all about?
I like to think so for sure.
Mhm.
It's definitely a step in the right direction of morphing our sound. What I want as the end result out of all this is for when somebody hears even the first 2, 3 seconds of a song, and I want them to think that's Saber.
Now, you mentioned that the album was held back for a while. Have you written any new songs since?
We've already started working on new material, so there's not going to be a delay,
Mhm.
as long as a delay as there was from the first one to the second one. So from the second to the third is going to be a lot less time. We're already working on stuff.
And the reason I really asked you that question is, do you see the path from the new album continuing with those new songs?
Definitely. So what happened was a lot of stuff was being written all at and during that time. So there's still like influence from that time
Hmm.
in the music for this time. But we're also like looking at different ideas, so it might morph a little bit. And then on one idea that everybody keeps asking, which is definitely going to come out on this third record, there's going to be a ballad for sure. Everybody's been asking, and so I already have like 3 or 4 song ideas, and I'm like, well, I just got to pick the best one, whichever comes out the best.
Yeah. Also, I mean, this time you guys have a label behind you, like you mentioned before. So how did
Mhm.
RPM Roar enter the picture?
So they came in first, they were Fire Flash,
Mhm.
and I saw what they were doing with other bands, and I thought we'd be perfect with them. So I reached out to Marcus, I sent him an email, and to my delight, he replied, and he was a huge fan of the band, and he thought that we were under a different label, which is why he never reached out. And we ended up working out a deal, and we thought it was great, so we signed with him. And the reason there was a delay was because he also worked with Atomic Fire, which was the bigger label of Fire Flash.
Mhm.
But I guess the labels thought it'd be best to just come together and form one big label. So they had to work out all the logistics and the finances, which took, I think it was about a year, a little over a year. So by that time, our when we were talking to Marcus before we signed, our album was already done.
Mhm.
So the album was done in the summer of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, we waited over a year to get a response that labels merged, and then we finally got a release date, which was it's just February 7th of 2025.
And what kind of a support can a band like yourselves get from a label these days?
Definitely exposure to areas that we can't reach because we were without warning, we were independent. We only got as far as we could push it. When you're with a label, they can definitely push your music overseas to other areas that you've never even heard of, and that's what we want to do. We want to reach places that we never thought we could, so we can get fans there. And when we come through town, the shows just get packed and we have fun. That's it. That's the reason why we signed with them, and they do great. They definitely they put us on magazines already. We're doing great interviews with people like you, so it's just like I already see the ball rolling, and it's just a matter of like now we got to put in the work to get the tours going and come to a city near you.
And when it comes to touring, what kind of support do you get for touring? Is that something that the label helps you out with, or you strictly on your own?
It's just a matter of finding a promoter at that point.
Hmm.
Some labels will have promoters. I believe ours does have one. We just have to find a way to work with them,
Hmm.
or whichever one. It's just a matter of like which promoter does the best for the band or what they can offer.
And what kind of a touring plans do you have for this album?
We definitely want to reach the Midwest going East Coast because we haven't gone there and we have a ton of fans that want to see us out there. And we have a ton of fans in Europe that have been reaching out. They've been wanting us to go. So we got to find the right promoter in Europe and then get a promoter here in the US.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hear a lot of stories from bands saying that it's so difficult to tour nowadays, and those are established bands. So I was always kind of wondering what's it like for up and coming band, when you have to really kind of break yourself out there and make yourself visible,
Yeah, it's always tough. Getting started is probably the hardest part, honestly. And then you got to cut your teeth, you got to pay your dues, and some people they don't make it. It's definitely hard. We've been fortunate enough to have Trevor by our side. He took us on our first tour. He like exposed the band to so many big platforms that Haunts on. So, we were fortunate to have that. And it
Yeah.
made it a lot easier for people to get to know the band, listen to our music, and just have that image of the band. And it's like so that way when now that this album's coming out, people already know who we are, what we sound like, and it just makes it a lot easier.
And for those anticipating seeing the band live, what kind of show can they expect from you?
Oh man, heavy riffs, shrieking vocals. I mean, you name it. And then this goes back to what I was telling you, the visual aspect we put on our outfits. And it's not really more like a gimmick. It's like we dress like this, and
Hmm.
it's just like that's just how we feel. And it's just something that I feel like I said earlier is just lost through time, where people don't want to put in the effort on their image when they're playing. I mean, I think it goes hand in hand. Like you need to look badass when you're up there playing badass music. It
I
just completes the whole circle.
I could not agree more. Do you have any other plans for 2025?
Just hopefully going on a tour, and that's pretty much it. And then possibly completing writing on the third album by the end of the year for sure.
That sounds like you're gonna be busy for a long, long
It's
time.
we're gonna be busy.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me, and good luck with the tour and the new record.
Of course. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for so much for having me.